All right. Welcome everybody to our Alberta Homeschooling Association presentation today on homeschooling kindergarten and the primary years. I'm Krista and we have Golda and Cynthia here to help out with this presentation.
Yes. Hi.
Hello.
So, like I said earlier, I've been homeschooling my kids now for 7 or 8 years. I started out homeschooling them back in Ontario, and then about 3, 4 years ago, I can't even remember, we moved to Alberta. We're in Calgary, and we're very happy here. And we found a school board and continued homeschooling our kids here. And yeah, my kids are in grade 7 and grade 5, and I'm still homeschooling them. They're still happy to be homeschooled, and it's great. And if I can do it, you can do it too. Does Golda or Cynthia want to introduce themselves too?
Yeah, I'm Golda. So we're all board members of the Alberta Homeschool Association. I've been homeschooling my son since he was in the middle of grade 3. He's now in grade 10. I'm also I was a teacher and a school principal at one point, so I kind of bring a background that's different because I know how the school system works a little bit. And yeah, he's been mostly unschooled actually since grade 3. And one of the reasons why I moved towards that from, the workbook thing to unschooling was because it seemed to work better and he seemed to learn more. So I've been homeschooling for a few years now, and it works as far as I can see. So that's me.
That's awesome, Golda. It's so good. Golda and I are quite similar in that way that we have done unschooling as well. We were actually out in New Brunswick when we um tried it out sort of for the first time. We did about 6 months just so we could tour the province. And just thought our son wasn't really learning a whole bunch. And then we realized that while he played and we discussed and asked questions, he could spell just about any word in the dictionary. And it was really, it was such an eye-opening experience. And so then when we moved to Alberta, originally from Saskatchewan, but we moved kind of back out west and ended up in Medicine Hat. They went to public school for a little bit. And all of a sudden, halfway through grade 7 and grade 4, they both said, no, we want to stay home. So we switched gears pretty fast and started doing home education before it was popular through the pandemic. And yeah, now we're looking at a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old here in about a month. So yeah, we've been home for quite some time. And exactly what Krista said, if we can do it, you can do it. Any question you have, any fear you have is probably so similar to what we went through. So if we can help you get farther and faster in this and have it to be as enjoyable as possible, we would love to do that. So yeah, just excited for what you think about this webinar tonight, and we look forward to talking with you and kind of interacting after Krista presents, because she's so amazing at Google Slides.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, you can feel free to put your questions in the chat too. And I'm sure Golda and Cynthia will monitor that because you might have questions as I go along too. And that's totally cool. I'm happy to, stop and answer them. All right. So we're going to start out with what is homeschooling? Um, oh, sorry. I did something wrong. That's my family. Hang on. Zoom, where is it? It's in here. Here it is. What is homeschooling? Can everybody see the screen okay? Oh dear.
Oops. Yes, we can see it, Krista.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, so what is homeschooling? So homeschooling is a parent-directed approach to educating a student in grade 1 through 12 at home or elsewhere, in which parents or guardians are responsible for making all the education decisions. So you get to choose your own curriculum. You get to decide what you want to do, essentially. It's really great. But why would you choose home education? There's lots of reasons. Some people choose it because you can personalize the learning or cater it to individual learning styles and cater it to the pace of your child. Maybe you feel like your child is really far ahead. They're already reading and kindergarten is just about to begin, or they were reading before kindergarten starts, and you want them to you want to be able to push them further or work with them where they're at. Or maybe they are not ready to read or write at all. And maybe they have some learning disabilities. Maybe they don't understand math. Maybe they're way ahead in math. You can cater to what their learning style is and the pace that your child needs. And it works. Another reason is to have stronger family bonds. The one thing that I really love about homeschooling is I have two kids and they are sisters and they're the very best friends. And it's amazing because when you homeschool, there's not that pressure to play with kids only your own age, and there's not that same competitiveness that sort of naturally happens in schools. They, as homeschoolers, they'll play with kids any age, and it doesn't matter to them if a kid is older or younger. They're happy to play with anybody and talk to anybody. Homeschooling lets you go deeper and more specialized in your learning, so you can focus on dinosaurs in depth if that's what your kid's really interested in, or you can focus on flowers. One of my kids was really interested in learning all the wildflowers and learning all the trees when she was, 4 or 5 years old. And so that's what we did. Um, Homeschooling allows for flexibility, so you can adapt to it to your family schedules and travel. So whatever your family is doing, if you're working during the mornings, you can learn in the afternoons, and that's okay. If you're working on some of the weekdays, you can learn on the weekends, and that's totally cool too. And you can also align your home education with any family values, moral, and religious beliefs. So homeschooling in Alberta is totally allowed by law, and there's two different options. There's the supervised by school authority option where you get funding. It involves an oversight from a public, separate, or francophone school board, and you may be eligible for funding. So you can get up to $901 in funding if you are in grade 1 through 12. In kindergarten, the funding amount is $450.50 because kindergarten is a half day. So the schools, like Alberta Ed, decided when they put in this funding, that the funding should only be half for kindergarten. There's also a not supervised by school authority or a notification only non-funded option, which requires an annual notification to the Minister of Education. And then parents have full responsibility for curriculum and evaluation.
And they do when they're homeschooling too, parent directed. And I just want to jump in and say you might have noticed we didn't include I don't know if it's in a future slide, but we didn't include online learning because that's not considered home education. That's considered teacher directed, like school at home, which is different. And it's not, and that's funded very differently. So that's not actually what we don't we don't talk about that a lot. That is an option in Alberta, but it's not very good for young people. Like little people don't do well with online schooling. They don't recommend it for the primary years anyway, because it's not a valuable learning experience for most kids.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, kindergarten to grade 3, you should try and avoid that if at all costs. Yeah.
Yeah, the school at home with the online teacher, it's not, I mean, if someone decides to do that, that's your right, and it is a choice, but it is not been very successful. Kids learn better by playing and interacting with real people.
For sure. Thank
Little
you.
people. Okay.
Yeah. So I just put in a bit here. Actually, going back to the last slide, maybe Golda or Cynthia could add in the forms for the homeschooling into the chat so that people have them, because if you are planning to register, you'll need to fill out the supervised by a school authority form or not supervised by a school authority form. I don't know if that's okay to add to the chat. Or I can add it to the chat later. Um, the next thing that you'll have to sort of think about is like choosing a school board and a facilitator. So do you want to go with a public school board, a separate school board, or a private school board? You might want to think about those things. Do you want to have what support and resources do the school boards offer you, and what are their philosophies on education? Um, you're allowed as a homeschooler to go with any school board. You can go with a separate school board, and they're supposed to support you, even if you are not following that same religion. You are not restricted to the school board that's within your geographical area. So you can go with any school board across Alberta. It doesn't really matter. Actually, when I first started, I went with a school board all the way out in Peace River, and we're in Calgary. So really it's okay and it works. And you do a lot of your meetings with your facilitator over Zoom. So it's totally okay to do stuff like that. You can ask questions of your school board and your facilitator to see if they are right for your student or your family. And I would definitely recommend doing that before going with a school board. So for kindergarten home education, it's a little bit more special. There's an age requirement. So the student or the kid that's going into kindergarten has to be at least 4 years and 8 months old, and no older than age 6 on September 1st of the year that they're to start kindergarten. They also have to be a resident of Alberta, and they have to be registered with a supervising school authority before September 27th if you want funding. I'm not sure why the date is earlier, but that's what's listed on the Alberta Education website. So I would try and follow that if I were you. And for funding, parents of children enrolled in the kindergarten home ed program qualify for only half of the regular grant provided to traditional education students. So they qualify for $450.50. So what that grant means is that when you buy stuff that's on your home education plan, so it might be home internet so that you can do different things on the internet and different research with your child. It might be buying books, it might be buying Lego, Montessori supplies, those sorts of things. You would then claim them. And then your school board would reimburse you later. They don't give you the $450.50 right away. It's something you have to claim back. Okay. And if your kids is in grade 1 through 12, you can claim up to $901 per school year. So the next thing you would want to think about is to choose a learning style. So for me, I started out being more traditional and emphasized textbooks and workbooks, but my child was crying and it was terrible, and I felt like the worst possible parent. And so then I found out through some friends about unschooling, which is like child-led learning where you focus on their interests and do what your kid wants to do. And they're essentially learning the whole time. So we went to the library a lot, and we learned about all the wildflowers when she was in kindergarten. I read lots of stories to her because she wasn't really ready to read yet. And we did math through games. Like, I don't know, I can't even remember anymore. We played all kinds of card games and little board games. And we even had a game, I think it was called Outfoxed, where it taught like about deduction skills, deductive reasoning. And I think we did that around age 4 or 5. and cooking taught math, that sort of thing. So that's what you would do with unschooling. It's basically just learning through day to day. Some people choose to do Charlotte Mason approach, which focuses on living books and nature study. Other people choose Montessori methods, which is a self-directed learning with lots of hands-on materials. I incorporated Montessori stuff with our math, and that helped my kids. And other people use an eclectic approach, which is basically a combination of different approaches. You don't have to be tied to one approach. And sometimes one approach is right for a certain amount of time, and then it stops working either for you or for your child. And so you got to change and do something different. So when you're choosing a learning style, you need to obviously consider your child's learning style, your child's interests, and your budget. And there's other learning styles too. So, these are just the more popular ones that you'll hear about as you learn about homeschooling. So my tips for success as a homeschooling family, you should set some realistic goals. So start with small goals and gradually increase the expectations. So when they're in kindergarten, it might be just like, we're going to paint a picture today. Or we're going to go for a nature walk today, or maybe we'll go to the library today. And that's enough. At least it was for us when my kids were that age, because I had a kid who was 2 years younger as well. So one thing in a day was a lot. Embracing flexibility. So you got to be adaptable and adjust plans as needed. You don't be stuck to one thing. If it's not working, switch to something else, and that's okay. Take breaks. So incorporate regular breaks for play and relaxation into your day, and take breaks from learning and back off when needed. So when we're learning, our brains need time to absorb what they've learned. So what I found is, like, when my oldest was learning to read, she'd kind of hit a wall and not be able to learn any further. So we would stop, take a break, and I would just read to her and stop teaching her reading for a month, 2 months, sometimes 3 months. And then I'd break out the readers again and have her start learning again with reading. And she would maybe be about 2 steps back from where she was, but she'd be able to advance, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. And then she'd hit a wall again, and we'd take a break again and start again, that same process. And we did the same thing with math and the same thing with learning music. And I actually see the same in myself when I'm learning stuff. It's just inevitable part of how we learn.
I'm sorry, no, I'm just.
I think we have someone who's got her audio on. Let's see.
We muted it.
Thank you. Whoops.
And I'm sorry for the camera being off, but I got kicked out of the Zoom session a couple times already because my internet's not working very well.
Yeah, poor Golda. She's still here. She just disappeared incognito.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
So we do have some questions that we should probably address right now, maybe.
Okay.
One of the questions is related to unschooling, because I'm the one that mentioned unschooling. So unschooling refers to child-directed education. And even if you're with a facilitator, you can unschool. It's just that the facilitator needs the input of what the child is wanting to learn or what they've learned. So you can unschool and let your child lead and still have funding and still go through a board and still have a facilitator. So I just wanted to clarify that, because that's a
For sure.
Okay, I think she cut out, but yeah, very good point, Golda.
that was asked a little while ago. Another question right now is, turn the video off. It seems to
Yeah,
make
go for it.
better. Um,
Oh dear.
I think, did I cut it out?
Yeah, you're still cutting out.
Yeah.
I can read it here too, if this is the same one.
Go for it, Cynthia.
Okay, so the most recent one here is it best to choose a facilitator in your own city, or can you choose anyone you like after reading their bio on any of the websites? You can go province-wide. Um, we often say that picking a facilitator is actually sometimes a better fit even than picking your school board. Because even if, like, let's just say that you prefer a secular school board, you don't want to have, any sort of a religious base to your teaching. Even if like all the secular boards are taken up and the only places that have spots are on a secular board, they still will respect your decision to not do, say, faith-based. So, if you find a facilitator within a faith-based and that's not necessarily, what you're going with, it's the facilitator match that is the utmost. We actually followed our facilitator. She switched gears from one school board to another school board, and we just stayed with her because my son had a hard enough time connecting with one, so we just kept with her, and it was so awesome.
We did the
All
same.
right. Are all three of you with the funding and on a school board? Yes, we
Yes.
all are. And I recommend it highly. There's only 2 visits per year, which we'll probably get into. But the funding is so wonderful because it pays for your internet, it pays for any books or um, yeah, any of your supplies that you might need. Well, internet, I guess I should say, is half of your internet per year. We can go through so many of the more things that it includes too. But yeah,
I
definitely
also
encourage funding.
I also think that it offers a level of protection. Like if the Revenue Canada asks you for your child's registration for school, which they often do, then the principal can write a letter saying you're registered. If anybody, and I know most people don't have to deal with this, but every once in a while somebody will have someone called Child Protective Services saying that they're not allowing their child to be educated, and then a facilitator can step in and deal with the social worker and say, nope, they've met all the requirements of the home education regulation, which is in the Education Act, and they've met their expectations, and the file is closed after that. So it's I it's rare, but it does happen sometimes. So
And
it's a
I
level
was called.
of protection
It's
too.
rare, but I was called. So
Yeah.
somebody called me in. It does happen.
Yeah.
Do not fear. It's your worst fear, but it's actually fine.
Yeah, the social worker gets in touch with the facilitator. The facilitator says, nope, they've had their meetings, they're doing everything that they're supposed to do, and that's it. That's it.
Yep.
Case closed. So
So
it's a
good.
level of protection too.
That's a great point, Golda. Thank you.
Can I also add, it's also a level of support for you as a home educator too, because if you have any questions, you can go to your facilitator and be like, oh, my child is, really struggling with the math program I chose. Do you have any recommendations for a different program or what I should do? And your home education facilitator should be able to, lead you in some different directions and help you out. I've always found that with ours. She's always able to provide support for us whenever I've struggled with anything. So that's something to keep in mind too. It's
Yeah,
so
because that's exactly so good, Krista. Yes, it's a leg up. It's supposed to be a leg up. It's not supposed to be, the binoculars looking down on your family and being like, okay, what did you all do this year? You have to, give us everything. It's yeah, it's supposed to be the support that Krista's talking about. So, and you can switch facilitators. Don't forget that either. That's also not, you got to find a fit for your family. So,
yeah. Did you guys have any further questions right now or because that
I'm good. Anything for you, Golda?
None of the questions, uh, someone did say it's encouraging to hear about taking breaks. So I just wanted to share that with you, Krista.
okay.
And they were talking about, is it best to choose a facilitator in your own city? And I think it depends on the city and if there's if that particular school is offering like activities, sometimes people choose facilitators and schools based on that. But you can choose anyone in the province that's a facilitator that's taking students. Somebody asked, do you have an example plan for kindergarten that you can share just to see what it looks like? And there is one on the website, the Alberta Homeschool Association website. The plan, like the program plan that you submit to the facilitator, that we do have examples on our website.
To add to that, though, you probably don't need to stress about that too much because every single school board is going to have different plans to follow, and your facilitator should help you to make your plan. So try not to stress too much about making your plan, especially in kindergarten, grade 1 or grade 2 or 3.
It does depend on the school board though, because some school boards I've heard like have pretty rigorous 10-page program plans to fill out. So, but yeah, your facilitator should help with that. So, but if there is examples on, and then there's other boards that are like, it's like a Google form where you just click boxes. I mean, there's such a wide variety of requirements out there. So pick a board where it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess all that kind of leads into my tips for success. My last tip is to seek support. So connect with other homeschooling families and connect with resources that are there, like homeschool support groups like the Alberta Homeschooling Association, that's us. There's also just find groups in your community where you are of homeschoolers. You can search them out on Facebook by searching like Homeschooling Calgary if you're in Calgary, or whatever city or town you're in. There's probably someone. Ask at your local library. If you're in a small town, I bet the librarian will know of families that are homeschooling and maybe be able to sort of connect you with them somehow. Or they might know of programs for homeschoolers too. So,
so one of the questions that just came up was, if we choose a board and later in life want to switch to put them in a Catholic or public school, will that be a problem? And like switching from secular to Catholic, and could they reject it? So the answer to that is yes, a Catholic board can reject a student. It's unlikely that they will because there is a lot of money involved. That's one of the reasons that they recruit students so strongly, is because but I guess it depends on where you live, and Catholic boards can reject students. That is true. Public schools cannot, not if you live in their catchment area. They have an obligation to educate the children in the area that they're in. And then there was another question about, can we touch on how they get their high school diploma for entrance to university? But that's kind of out of the scope of this one, I think. Right, Krista? We're just going to say probably it doesn't matter till grade 10.
Yeah, and they can definitely get their high school diploma, so you don't need to worry about that. They can do those courses when they reach grade 10, and they can do it through home education. So the resources I wanted you to know about are, Judy wrote this book that's on the left-hand side called Unschooling to University. She educated all of her kids through unschooling, and they've all gone on to university and been very successful. Some of them have tech careers. I think her daughter has a writing career. One of her sons has become a teacher, even though he was unschooled his whole life. So she has a lot of success stories from homeschooling, and her book is very, very helpful. So you could order her book through emailing her, and the information is all on the Alberta Homeschooling Association website. You can find more resources on Alberta Education website. They have a page on home education. There's the Association of Independent School Boards Alberta has some information. Con Communications has learner support. So if your child is having, or if you suspect your child's having some learning disabilities, you can go on there as a home educator and you can take some of their online courses, and you can also register and get in line for some consultations with their counselors and whatnot. Check out your local library. They have lots of books and online resources, educational programs, audiobooks, like from kindergarten to grade 3. And even still, my kids love audiobooks, and we would have spent a fortune on books. But the local library saved our butts because it would have been well outside our budget. And like I said earlier, check out your social media and online forums for homeschooling groups in your area. It's so important to have a community and to have that support as a parent. And it's also important for your child to see other kids that are homeschooling too. It helps them to understand that they're not alone in being homeschooled and that it's okay. And yeah. For homeschooling in the primary years, one of the key things, or the key things I think, are to build a strong foundation in literacy and numeracy. So basically in kindergarten, they're working on reading and numbers. You want to start developing some critical thinking skills, foster curiosity and a love for learning, and incorporate play-based learning. So it shouldn't, like for kindergarten and grade 1, 2, and 3, it doesn't need to be book learning. I learned that through teaching my own kids. And if you can learn something from me, try to, go to the library and get books, but it doesn't have to be workbooks and textbooks for kindergarten to grade 3. It's like read books that they're interested in. My kids loved the Elephant and Piggy books by Mo Willems when they were starting to learn how to read, and they'd take those stories and act them out, and they loved it, and they would memorize them and they would read them back to me before they could even read. So yeah, and like numeracy can be learned through games and like playing cars. How many cars did you park in your parking lot and stuff like that? And when they're 4 years old, they should really, like, the goal is to be able to count and recognize that they have 4 cars when there's 4. They might be able to count to 10, but they might not be able to recognize that there's 10 cars, because that's hard. Whoops, I forgot to include Golda's contact information on this slide. But that's my contact information, and that's Cynthia's contact information. And I think I had that slide out of place. I had about socialization too, because people often have the concern with homeschooling. The first thing people are going to ask you when you say, oh, I'm going to homeschool, well, how's your child going to get socialized? And you might struggle at first, but homeschooling provides ample opportunities for socialization. There's lots and lots and lots of homeschooling groups. So you can connect with other homeschooling families for social events, for homeschool co-ops, field trips, and just for support too. There's lots of extracurricular activities. Your kids can join sports, even if they're after school. It's still, socializing with other kids. There's lots of clubs, there's music lessons, volunteering, community involvement, so going to library programs and community events. There's so many ways to provide socialization, and you can provide as much socialization as you want or as little as you need. It might mean that your child might not want to socialize all the time, so maybe socializing once a week is enough for your family, but maybe your child is a social butterfly and wants to socialize every day, and that's okay. Even going to the playground is socializing, going to the grocery store too. So, yeah, they're learning wherever you go. And I think I had another slide after this, but it's not working. And I'm not sure why. Let's see. Oh, maybe it disappeared. I guess This was my question and answer slide. So what I'm going to do, do we have any questions in the chat right now?
Yes, there was quite a few of them actually.
Okay.
So I did provide the website. It's albertahomeschooling.ca because somebody asked where the recording will be because they have to leave.
Okay.
So one of the questions is about, can you explain what co-ops are and if they're free? So co-ops are a group of parents that get together and either hire a teacher or they become the teachers themselves and they share the responsibility with, so that's co-op. Sometimes teachers will set up co-ops and then they'll be the teacher and you drop your kids off, kind of like school, except you get to choose what they learn, or that co-op decides what they learn instead of following the Alberta Program of Studies. So that's a co-op. Whether or not it's free, it will depend on the co-op or the pod, which are very similar. Pods and co-ops are similar. They're little groups of kids that are learning together, but they're learning what they want instead of, or what their parents want instead of what the school system would teach them. And so some are paid and some aren't. It depends on where you live and what's available. And you can set up your own, actually. So you can set one up for the people in your area and you can share the responsibility with parents. And that's what a lot of people do is they get together and they share the responsibility for educating their children in a group. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Krista, Cynthia?
No, I think that's perfect. That completely covers it. I mean, I know that there's other homeschooling groups, which is a little bit different than even co-ops and pods. It can look the same, but you can say have a community group, in there could be many in Calgary, and they're not necessarily like where all of the exact learning happens, but I mean kids are learning all the time, but it could be that they're going off and doing, I know Krista's been a part of different ones. And this week they meet at this park, and then at this week they go to the science center and they gather for field trips and sports and playtime and or baking or whatever. So it's not necessarily called a co-op or a pod, but it can be a group that just does, a ton of socializing or getting together, picnics and different things like that. And sometimes home ed boards, school boards will actually offer those things. I know ours does a ski trip. I think there's an offer to participate in that. It does cost obviously to go. And then there can be abroad trips too. Golda might have some more information about that later. I don't know if that really applies to the primary years, but anybody that's got some older kids or something to look forward to for down the road. And oh, our kids say hi. Oh, thank you, Maria. That's awesome.
There was another question too. We've been in touch with one facilitator, however, recently heard that her board didn't provide the families with a grant after 1 or 2 years. Will the facilitator be able to help with that in case it happens? And so I can answer that one because I've seen this. So boards are required to provide funding if you have receipts. They have to. You have up to 2 years to claim it. Like this year we have, at the end of this year, we have another year to claim what we spent this year. So the boards, sometimes their reimbursement funding process is not ideal. We know that there's problems. There has been cases that Alberta Homeschool Association has dealt with where a board has refused to, and so Alberta Homeschool Association advocates sometimes to the ministry, asking our field agent, hey, is this okay? And they'll say no, and then the board can get in trouble for that. They're required to give that money to you if you have receipts. So it doesn't happen very often. I know that there's a lot of chatter online about boards. People are frustrated, but as far as I know, every single case has been resolved eventually, and the parents do get their money. It just takes more time sometimes. And I know what board you're talking about. So I know that they've had issues with reimbursement, and so have other schools too, actually. So But yes, the facilitator can help because they can help advocate for you often. They can write the emails and say, hey, why isn't this parent getting their funding? And sometimes there's a reason why they didn't get their funding, like the receipt wasn't actually a receipt or something like, so there's lots of reasons why that could happen. But the board is required to give you your funding if you have a receipt, and it's within the time frame that they have to give it to you. And they can get in an awful lot of trouble if they don't. So, but you can come to the Homeschool Association as well. Judy often advocates with Alberta Education for people who are having issues like that. And I've seen her at meetings talking to administrators who've done that and arguing with them and then getting Alberta Education involved. So we do advocate too. The facilitator will advocate, and the boards know what their responsibility is. But you can reach out to that facilitator again, the person that asked that question, and you can ask her or him directly about those situation you might be talking about. Okay.
All right, there's another one just, I think, below that, Golda. It says, any recommendations for families that have 2 full-time working parents? There are no pods in my area. There are no homeschooling day homes, no family in the area, etc. Can we do it? Of course, we're going to cheer you on. But I guess there is some things to consider with all of that. It depends, I guess, too, if you work opposite each other, how taxing your job is, and if you're ready to come home and kind of dive in. Of course, though, if you go the like leaning towards more the unschooling side of things, then you don't necessarily have workbooks, and it definitely is more hands-on, more play-based, and leaning towards the interest of your children. But it can work. I know that there's other parents who do it. Golda works full-time. And Krista, they have one full-time parent, and then she does some part-time work at home. My husband works full-time, 12 hours usually a day. My kids are older now, but they were younger, and he was doing full-time and I did part-time, and we did it. So yeah, get creative. It can be done. If you're excited about it, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot less time than people think too. Like that's one of the things,
Yeah.
like when they're in school for 6 or 7 hours a day. But when you're homeschooling, especially in the primary years, you shouldn't be doing more than 1 hour of formal work because kids can't absorb more than that.
No.
So that's kind
So
of
true.
Yeah. And
true.
like, I guess you got to consider when your kids are that age, do you have like care for them during the day when you're working, or are you working from home, and will they be okay while you're working from home? Can you and your partner, assuming you have a partner, maybe adjust your hours so that you're not both working at the same time? But then that can also be hard on relationships. So I don't know. You got to figure that out in your family. But maybe you can find, I don't know if there's any other homeschooling families in your area, but maybe they have an older child that could come and help nanny your child while you're working. There's options like that sometimes that are available that you have to explore through homeschooling groups and whatnot.
So good. So good. Is play-based learning using things like number blocks? It's a show, so I guess a television show, because they also have counting blocks and toys you can buy to help solidify learning for preschool, kindergarten age. Screen time for me is fully involved together with them. I say go for it. If your kids are just loving it and it works for you, that's awesome. It definitely, when your kids are on board, it's a whole lot easier. And kids are sponges at that age. They'll soak up and learn whatever. They could just go alongside you and they're just learning. So
yeah.
What else do you guys want to add to that?
Play-based learning is really just learning through play. And so your child should be playing, and as they're playing, they're learning about stuff. So you can incorporate learning through play. Like I used to make like a parking lot with cars, and we would sometimes spell words with the cars, like they all had letters on them, or we would, count with number blocks. So yeah, I guess like a lot like what you were doing. But then sometimes it was like, when they were really little and learning their colors. Oh, the Barbie's wearing the red dress or whatever, things like that.
There's so many ways, and there's books about that kids and research about that kids learn better with play when they're that age. Like their brains don't develop the real ability. Like worksheets look like learning to us, but it's not for a little kid. They learn by playing and imitating. And so that kind of answers the question. There was a question about having a kindergarten and a grade 2 student at the same time. How do you meet the needs of the grade 2 student and don't leave the kindergartner behind, or the other way around, one's bored and one isn't? And one of the answers to that is play. Little kids that are 5, they like imitating their older siblings quite often. And so you'll see them actually progress faster in some areas because they're trying to copy their older sibling. And there's programs out there actually that where they can both learn at their own level but learn the same thing. Like I think it's Gather Round Homeschooling is one of those programs that are like adapted to different ages. Because I know people who have like 7 kids and they're all like from grade 9 down to kindergarten, and they have to manage that. So I know it's doable, it's possible, and everyone's needs are met.
It's actually what I do. I have 2 kids
Yeah.
that are 23 months apart, and I teach, like, I will take some extra time with one kid and do something different with the older one than what I do with the younger one. And that, like, she'll be doing a different math program than the younger one.
Yeah.
It's totally okay to do that.
Yeah, we did the same thing. There's another comment here. Also, any recommendation on how to balance the time between 2 kids during lessons? And it just parallels with exactly what we're talking about. And my boys are 3 years apart. And I did exactly the same as Krista and Golda. It's when my oldest son was learning the periodic table, that's the poster that went up on the wall. And my youngest one learned right along with the oldest. So they catch up. And then, the older one, we found his reading and spelling was really good, but our child that was 3 years younger went even farther than him in different areas. So it just goes to show, it's like, yeah, they might be put in with their peers in public school, but every child is learning at a different level. So yeah, be encouraged about that. Be really encouraged about that, because it's so cool. It's so cool to see.
And it's interesting because I used to be a school teacher and a principal, and when you're in a classroom of 30, even though they might be the same age, there's all different varieties of levels of capacity in that class. And teachers just like kind of adapt. They go around, they talk to each child, especially ones that are struggling. Like it's kind of I know it's kind of just a common issue in education in general, having different levels, maybe not different ages, but different levels. And I think, I mean, I've seen lots of people do it. Krista does. I think one of the parents did mention how they do it, um, practicing doing independent play first. When one kid doesn't want to do what was planned, they can confidently play independently. So they focused at first on playing independently for each of the children that are apart in age, so that when that happens, they can go play on their own, and they're learning through that play. So yeah,
It's amazing what kids all do through play. Like they connect through play, they learn through play, they even de-stress through play.
Yeah.
Like when they're stressed out, that's what I found when my kids they just went and played. They ran it off, they jumped it off, they Legoed it off, they, read, they did, they danced, like whatever it was, that's how they de-stress.
had an argument
They,
between their
yeah, big,
Barbies
like
for
swords and
yeah, angry.
yeah, we had foam swords and Star Wars light up. What I even forget what they're called, laser swords or something, and they just whacked, and then it was over. It was so good.
Yeah.
We just had a
Oh yeah,
comment here.
it is like there's a book called Free to Learn by Peter Gray. He's a psychologist in the States, and he studied the unschooling movement and education and how people learn and all of that. His book is excellent. if you want to feel better about that whole play thing, you should read his book because he like dissects how kids are learning, what kids are learning from their play. Like he sat there and watched them, him and a team sat there and watched them and did research for like months, years, and then could like dissect what exactly they were learning with their play. And his
Mhm.
book is excellent to make you feel better about that whole play is learning. It's not just we think of it as just fun, but actually they learn more from that than from any worksheet when they're that age.
Well,
And they learn when they're determined to learn. Like
Yes.
when they are determined to conquer something, or they're desperate to participate in something, um, they will go after it. And one example that's my favorite, and um, probably none of you here have heard it except for Kristen Gold, have heard it 1,000 times, I think, is my son. There was no way that he was going to sit down and learn grammar. Like there was just absolutely no way. He was not a workbook kid at all, still isn't, and he's just about 18. But he loved an online game, and that would accept job interviews. And so you had to have perfect grammar in your online interview for whatever, job that you were going to do in this game. Well, he tried for 2 weeks and even got angry. And I let him get angry because he was so frustrated. He couldn't get in. He would grab his earphones and he'd throw them down and he'd run away. And then he would go back. He tried, I think, 15 times he had to go back for that interview, but he had to have perfect grammar in order to communicate with this other bot on the other side of on the computer screen. And then one day he nailed it and he got the interview and became, I think it was actually a sandwich artist of all the funny things he was applying for. But it just showed me the determination of like, I actually want to do this, so I have to learn how to do it. And it was way better than me sitting down and saying, you're going to learn this, or guess what? We're spending the next 2 weeks going to go over drills. Um, Now he can write emails. He goes to return something on Amazon, or, across the world if he orders something from Europe, some kind of book or whatever, he can communicate in those emails back and forth with the people negotiating a return, or, um, a damaged product or whatever. And it's hands-on learning was so awesome.
we all learn better when it matters to us, right? So that's kind
Yes,
of the thing, right? So when the learning has meaning to the kid, when it's something that they want to learn and they're invested in it, they're going to learn it and they're going to learn it really well. It's not like the learning I did when I was in elementary school and high school where I had to learn something for a test and the very next day I had forgotten it all.
exactly. It's so good, so true. Yeah. I love your comments in here too, just this last one about sick days. Funny of all things, like at school, you don't learn about sick days. You don't want to be sick, but you're glad you get a day off. But I love what you talk about here too. You learn um, about your body, and you get to spend time cuddling and snuggling so that there's that, reconnection just with your family. Just the attention. And then like you said, we cook soup all day long. Well, then you learn how to make a broth, and they learn how to care for other people because they become cared for. You learn about germs, and there's no guilt for staying home and missing things because we were already planning to be home. That's so good. Love it.
This is a good question too. How does it work for gifted children? My son's in kindergarten, but reads and does math at a grade 3, 4 level. Would the board push us to learn at a higher grade curriculum, or will we be able to follow his lead and not focus on reading and math? So I would say it highly depends on the board, but most facilitators will allow you to do what you think is best for your child. The reason that you took the responsibility and the control of your child's education is because you've decided that you know what's better for him. And most facilitators in Alberta would be supportive of that.
Yes.
I know some boards are not so much, but most of them are. So just make sure you pick a facilitator and a board that is supportive. because nobody should be pushing you to do anything with your child. As long as you're meeting the home education regulations, you're within your right to teach your child what and take his lead and have him do what he finds valuable.
Yeah, I second that, Amber. We're in that boat. So yes.
So are we allowed to tell the boards to stay away from it? And the answer is no, we can't. We have a list on our website. We've also, like the ones that are allowed to advertise with us are basically ones that have been vetted and we have allowed them on our website because they are not engaging in negative practices overall. And so if it's on our website, it's probably somebody we'd recommend. And we cannot badmouth the board. That's not fair. They're not here to defend themselves, so we don't do that.
So true.
And would you be able to share your favorite board? I can't. While I'm here as a board member, I'm unbiased about boards. I have to be because it's not fair to some, some are small. Yeah. So sorry, I can't. But there is a list on our website, which ones are Christian, which ones are Christian, which ones are secular, which ones are other, what they support and what they don't. And then from there you can pick a facilitator. They're often at this time of year, often on Facebook pages advertising themselves in some fashion, usually by answering questions. So just keep an eye out for somebody who matches your ideal facilitator thing and ask them like we do have a list of questions on our website too.
Yeah.
Of questions you can ask of facilitators to see if their values align with yours. And I think I would suggest having like interviewing a few of them to see which one you like best. And they have up usually too.
And I think we're doing a Zoom call just like this one about facilitator visits and stuff coming up here in the next however long. I don't know if it's in a month or two, something like that. But I love this comment too. I joined this to refresh what's age appropriate for my kindergarten kiddo. It's been fun homeschooling my eldest for 2 years, and I'm excited for my youngest to be officially registered too. Thank you for the refresher and the validation that this is the right path for us. Much different than the first year I joined this call. And that is encouragement to you all who are in, say, your first year. That's exactly what happens. You get more confident as you go along. And you will even get to high school if that's what you decide to do. And you'll be like, oh my goodness, like, what am I doing? Because things kind of shift and change a little bit at that point, but there's still supports available. And then all of a sudden you get there and you're like, I had all this guilt, I had all this fear, and it goes by the wayside after a while. And you're like, nope, this was 100% best decision that we made. So yes, thank you for that, for the post to encourage other parents.
The presentation that you're talking about facilitator visits, is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, that's on April 7th, next Monday. That's you and Krista doing that one.
I wouldn't have missed it. I just had to look at my calendar for a bit. I knew that there was one on Monday, but I couldn't remember which one it was. So, okay, I'll meet you there.
Yeah, and there's another one actually on Wednesday, the Homeschool 101, and you might be able to, because Judy will be at that one, and that might be a place to ask those questions about high school. So if you come on Wednesday, Judy will be here, and she'll be able, like, because this was geared towards primary years, so we don't want to touch too much on high school, but that's a good place to ask that question too, is that Homeschool 101. So it's Judy and Krista, I believe, on Wednesday, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Is the Monday one about how to pick a facilitator? No, I think it's about the facilitator visits, but I'm sure
facilitator visits.
Talk about that. Yeah, like what to expect at a facilitator visit.
So do you guys think now's a good time to stop the recording? And then if anybody wanted to come on to the chat and actually ask questions, they could, right? So I'll stop the recording here.